Welcome, Dr. Laura Maas, to the podcast, The Wellbeing Coaches. It's a real pleasure to have you on this. So thank you for coming on.
I'm glad to be here. Really, I think it's. I think we're going to spread a message. I think this podcast is going to be full of interesting insights. So yeah, Simon, now let's roll with it.
We're going for it. Excuse my red cheeks. I fitted in a quick little workout before this. Okay, so and then I rushed up, put a shirt on. I was like, oh, now I'm warm. I shouldn't have done that, but still, we'll press on straight away.
We'll have sweat and silence.
So what I want to do is this is just to showcase you, your clinic. I just want you to introduce who you are, what you do, and go from there.
Okay. Well, I'm Dr. Lawrence Maas. I'm a qualified osteopath in the UK. I'm a qualified doctor of integrated medicine in the USA. I practice functional medicine, and I have run a very successful clinic in West Sussex. I've been there now for since 2014. I mean, since like 6-7 years now. And the clinic is getting more and more popular. I think it's because functional medicine is getting more and more popular. People are understanding what it's really about. When I came here back in 2014, I'd already run a clinic in Barbados very successfully for about 20 years. And then I had to come to England because of schooling reasons for my kids, etc., because schooling in Barbados is not that great. It's much better over here. We closed up in Barbados, and then we came over to the UK. And it's been an amazing journey because I've always been really interested in how the human body really works. Mm-hmm. I've had my fair share of experiences of the NHS and other sort of medical doctors, and in large part some really disappointing approaches and results. And that's what got me really, really curious about how the body works. My story from when I was young is that I suffered from chronic headaches from around the age of 7, 8, 9, 10. I mean, it just went out throughout my whole life. And it got me asking questions about what could influence my headaches. I started getting really curious about food around the age of 10 and realizing that sweets and candies and junk food was really triggering it. So I kind of like already had an idea that food could influence, how my migraines were working. But then another thing started to affect me, which was eczema. I started to develop really bad eczema, and I delved into the food bit a bit more. I was I must have been about 14 at the time, and eventually came to this elimination process of there's something wrong with wheat. Every time I eat wheat, I react. So I cut out wheat at 14, 15, and it really helped. The eczema kind of subsided. And then there was another event that happened was I started getting, not only sort of getting over my headaches and my eczema, but there was another thing that happened in my life that really started to trigger me to going into functional medicine in a big way, which was I kind of developed a tumor. And this tumor was extremely painful. I had to have surgery to remove it, but it was one of these coincidences where I started to have an insight into how and what was going on. And the tumor had formed actually where I had a previous injection of penicillin, which was kind of quite remarkable because I couldn't shake the coincidence. Although I'd had the penicillin injection like 28 years before, fast forward into the future, I was like, something's going wrong. And at like 27, 28, well, actually what happened was I sliced off the tip of my finger, and that's where I'd got my penicillin injection. But then 28 years later, this tumor forms. And I was like, what's the connection between penicillin and tumors? And fortunately, it was a benign tumor. It was a glioma, but nevertheless, it was extremely painful. I had the surgery, and then I just got into bioresonance at that point in my life. I already qualified as a homeopath. And so this tumor was a real conundrum for me. And I started using bioresonance machines. And when I actually tested the tumor before it was removed, I measured the radio wave off it, and it actually came up with penicillin. It came up with another thing as well, which was candida. and like candida yeast. And the computer was basically telling me that I had a whole bunch of candida. It was caused by penicillin. And when I start linking back to my headaches, there's a link between chronic candidiasis and headaches. There's also a link between chronic candidiasis and eczema. And then there's this linkage all the way back when to a penicillin injection. And I started really sort of getting extremely curious, thinking, well, the machine, the radio frequencies can't be lying. And I've had it already. I had the surgery removed. I had it identified as a glioma. And then I started getting into the early days of Google and hunting for this information. What is the connection between penicillin and tumor formation? And what I came across was some amazing work from Professor Costantini from the World Health Organization, who wrote an amazing series of books called Fungal Bionics. And I managed to get copies of those. And in it, he describes huge amounts of studies after studies linking mycotoxins to cancer, heart disease, high cholesterol. And it really got me really thinking. I was thinking, why don't more people know this information? Why don't more GPs and doctors know this information from the World Health Organization? And then I suddenly realized that actually there is a conflict within medicine, which is you've got your humanitarian doctors that really care, and then you've got your doctors that just do it for economics. They just do it for monetary reasons. And when I actually looked at Costantini's publishers, he privately published his works. He didn't do it with a publishing house, because I think that he knew that this information was so valuable about fungal bionics and how it links into the chronic diseases that humans are experiencing, that he cautiously had it privately published, and that in no uncertain terms would that private publisher ever sell to a pharmaceutical company. Like a publishing house could, through a shell corporation, could buy a publishing house, and any books that were, counter to the sales of pharmaceuticals could just be left on a shelf somewhere gathering dust. And Costantini and what's his name, Dr. Plink and Dr. Viberg, there's three really top doctors that wrote this amazing book, but Costantini is the head guy. And and I think that he was doing it out of a sake for humanity, so that his information, his research would never be covered up. But it stands true that there are a lot of diseases that do relate to funguses. And I explored this more. And in my time in the trenches in Barbados, I saw a lot of clients with early cancer and candida and penicillin damaged. And it was really kind of insightful. So then that's what inspired me to write the book and talk heavily about funguses, which was the Hidden Cure, the 5 Laws of Perfect Health, which literally establishes more of what I saw in Costantini's, major works.
It's funny, how that comes up. There's a trainer that I followed under for some time. You may have heard of him. He's American, but Paul Chek.
Oh yes, the Czech Institute,
Czech Institute, health coaches. But it was interesting actually, just come up on Instagram. He was talking about fungus this morning, so how they correlate, and it's interesting that you've just brought that up today. I literally watched it this morning, so it's interesting. So your journey, past and present, and now your professional career, what probably led you, obviously you've set up the Maas Clinic, and let's touch in more into kind of what the Maas Clinic does.
Initially it was really heavily osteopathic, and then I started getting into nutrition and homeopathy and looking at allergies and really tailoring people's diets to their allergy testing, which worked for me. I kind of had to do it through the Sherlock Holmes, the process of elimination. But, you could take blood tests and you can actually find out what your body what your immune system thinks of your food choices. And so I explored that as part of my nutrition. And then I started getting really sort of heavily into the bioresonance and exploring the quantum field, the radio fields that are coming off the human body. So in a way, my education was, osteopathic, very mechanical. About gravity, movement forces, muscles, treatment techniques. And then it kind of moved into how do you feed the body? So I did the nutrition, Then I went into the homeopathy and then the computerized homeopathy and teaching about bioresonance. And this was just amazingly insightful because here I was trying to understand the human body on more subtler and subtler levels. And so we went from osteopathic to osteopathic nutrition. Then we went to osteopathic nutrition immunology. It eventually sort of blended into endocrinology. So I do a lot of adrenal testing and thyroid testing to try and rebalance the hormones. And then it kind of moved into the brain stuff, the neurotransmitters, the causes of depression and anxiety and sleep disorders. So in my journey, I've kind of like explored many areas and kind of sussed them, got really qualified into them. And slowly I've been building this very integrated picture. And that was actually my last degree, was a doctorate in integrated medicine that I completed in America in 2017. And and that I feel I've like almost understand everything. I mean, there's more to learn about the human body, but I've sussed a very good way, a method of how to get it back into balance. And it's not only just with people with, you know, allergies and autoimmune and chronic gut problems and hormonal problems. It was a bit run of the mill, so to say. I mean, I was seeing these clients day in, day out. And then perchance something really interesting happened. As you know, I'm really well into surfing. And one day, when this was in Barbados, one day, I was kind of like thinking, you know, it's like coincidences, like you said about Paul Chek and mycotoxins and fungi and how toxic they are. Well, there was a coincidence that happened. And I was thinking, well, what would my program do, you know, for an athlete? You know, I mean, does my Maas method actually work for athletes? I mean, we've got the really sick people. I know they're getting better from cancer, heart disease, cholesterol problems, allergies, autoimmune, burnout, adrenal burnout. So many people have that. I was thinking, could I apply this to an athletic world? And it was a little bit later that day, I got a phone call. It was a Sunday, and I got a phone call from a friend called Stuart Stout, a surfer, another fellow surfer. And he said to me, hey, you know, Kelly Slater has really injured his neck. I know it's Sunday, he's going to put you out of your way, but could you see him? And I knew who Kelly Slater was. At that time, he was 6-time world surfing champion. Yeah. And I said, yeah, no problem at all. I mean, I was literally waxing my board, ready to go out to catch some waves. And I said, well, I can't come over now, but if you just give me an hour, let me just get some waves. And you know, can you ask Kelly if I can just grab some waves, and then I'll meet him, you know, a couple of hours later. And Kelly said, yeah, no problem at all. I totally understand. I'll just hold off with the pain. So I had my surf session and then flew back home, really excited, knowing I was going to be treating the 6-time world surfing champion. And it was so bizarre. That morning, I'd been thinking about how would the program work for athletes. And of course, you know, I knew it would. And so I met Kelly Slater and we got talking. I fixed his neck. And then you know, in those early days, I was getting into functional medicine. I recognized that Kelly was actually burnt out. You know, I look at a lot of pro surfing competition, and I could see that his stats were just getting lower and lower. He was competing really heavily against a rival called Andy Irons. It was a huge rivalry that lasted for years. And Kelly was certainly a lot older than Andy. I mean, Kelly was 33 at the time, approaching the normal retirement age for a surfer. Andy Irons, his rival, was 23 at the time. He'd already bagged 3 world championships. He was the fast favorite. And as I was consulting with Kelly, I asked him, I said, look, you know, I can see you're burnt out. You know, I've got this program that really works with adrenal burnout. It's no surprise that you're burnt out. You've been on the competition circuit since you were 20. You know, you've been running it for 13 years. Out of those 13 years, 6 championships. I mean, going on the world tour is extremely tiring. Many time zones, you know, different foods, etc. And I said to him, I said, you know, if you can follow my program, and if we do this remotely, it could really improve your performance, and you could actually end up winning this year. And of course, the year that I'm talking about is 2005. And so he said, how long is it going to take? And I said, well, give me like 3 or 4 days to do, you know, all the workups, you know, sort his bones out, sort his nutrition out, do all the allergy testing, figure out what is his perfect food plan, and then also go into the quantum field and figure out exactly what to change with his biofrequencies. And he was really, really curious. And he said, right, I'm going to go for it. And so we agreed. And he went through the whole mill of tests and treatments. And later that year in 2005, he got his 7th world championship. And we've remained, friends since then. I give him a lot of advice. He's gone on to win the 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th world championship. I know he's gunning for his 12th, but he's a little bit old now, in my opinion. And
he doesn't.
He's just he's 50 years old. Come on. He's extended his career from 33 to 50. And so for me, my career, this is a tremendous achievement working alongside with Kelly and him proving the techniques actually worked for athletes just as what they worked for people with cancer, autoimmune, or burnout. And so it was really inspirational. And I worked with other surfers like Stephanie Gilmore. I got her to a 7th world championship. That was back in 2018. I worked with Geordie Smith. I worked with a couple of actors and actresses and pop stars. And you'll just have to work it out. Take that as for an example. I'm just dropping names. But anyway, so
why not? Why not?
Yeah, well, just throw it out there. So, it really is about, how to improve health. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're a pop star or an athlete, pro surfer, housewife, builder, air traffic controller, ambulance worker, diver. I mean, I've treated them all. And at the end of the day, there's some really hard and fast rules about how the human body truly works. And if you really want to make the body super healthy and energized, because it all comes down to energy. I mean, people have an energy crisis, with gas and electricity, but people have also got an energy crisis now post-COVID. Yeah. I mean, we know that COVID causes mitochondriopathies. The COVID virus actually damages the mitochondria, the cell's powerhouses. So what I see a lot of now currently is a lot of people with long COVID. They've got mitochondrial damage, so I've got to get in there, figure out the biochemistry of what's required to actually reboot the mitochondria. And I do this with athletes as well. It's no different. And the same advice that I say to a long COVID client, I say, well, look, once you've got your mitochondria up and running, and I've calculated all the specialized B vitamins that you need, and I'd say that also to an athlete. Yeah. So then you've got to basically, find time to do some really deep infrared work, infrared lamp therapy. And that becomes the wavelength that actually activates the mitochondria, and it switches the mitochondria from burning, sugars and lactic acid to actually making a lot more ATP. So burning sugars is about 4 ATPs, whereas if you burn fats and supplements, it basically converts around 36 ATP. And this is really important. And to activate it, you need infrared lamp in actual infrared wavelength to reboot it. And the infrared penetrates and it actually gets the whole cytochrome pathways going. And this is really, really important because not only will it improve athletic performance by 5 to 10%, and also with cardiovascular improvements and improvements after workouts as well, but also somebody who's suffering from autoimmune or chronic EBV. I really harp on about the electromagnetic dimension. We know the benefits of UV light, with vitamin D activation, makes us feel really good, raises serotonin, but that's a light frequency. It's an electromagnetic wave, and it's on the opposite scale of the spectrum of infrared. So you've got the violet and you've got the infrared, and everybody knows about the violet, and if you have too much, you can cause skin cancers, but not many people know about infrared. Some of the athletes do. A lot of the Swedes do, because they have saunas and they've been culturally doing that for thousands of years, knowing that heat really benefits. The other sort of culture that kind of explored this in its early form was moxibustion with traditional Chinese medicine, and actually heating up above that acupuncture point would basically cause vasodilation and improve the acupuncture meridian. So, I think that infrared, whether it's for an athlete or it's for a housewife with autoimmune, it's really, really important. And I really encourage all my clients to purchase their own lamps and do their work, especially in wintertime, as the weather gets colder. In Chinese, it's literally going more yin. And of course, infrared is a yang machine. Exercise is yang. It's like vascular. It's like heat, and all of that comes from ultimately the mitochondria. And the mitochondria, yeah, they're so important. They're like little cocktail sausages within our cells, and they're really, really important in creating good amounts of energy. And that energy, yeah, sorry, you're sharp.
Because I am coming into your clinic, come back to your clinic, because it is me being a bit of a country bumpkin, and I know there's some clinics out there that exist in London, but I come into your clinic, and you are really thankful for that, because it was absolutely amazing eye-opener, because I've not seen anything like it before.
Thank you.
It was a really well, and I think it comes to the point of, when you enter into a place and you feel welcome, your place is done very well with the reception, and it is that welcoming response. But it's more the fact that when and I'm going to post some videos into this conversation, but that I took on the day, but that process of how you come in, how you're treated, then the element of your testing and the knowledge that you went through, it was so well put together, in the sense of, we looked at, and you'll be able to tell me in a little bit more detail, but we looked at my red blood cell counts, didn't we, on the screen, and you zoomed in on that microscopic analysis and really broke down the detail. And what I thought was, again, amazing was how that knowledge of getting a test, like, we all know, going to get a blood test at a GP, we have to wait or phone the reception and just double check if they're in yet. But it was a case of, it was like Superman changing in the phone box, because instantly they were uploaded to your screen in your consultation room. And it took me a while just to get over that. So, and for me, it was, I left, and I really had to kind of process everything before I left, because it was so fine-tuned. There's nothing exists like that, or that I've come across anyway,
Yeah, no, it's really a really good formula. I mean, it's well honed, it's tried and tested. I'm not into bullshit. I'm really into, can you prove it? Is the evidence there? What is the shape of the red blood cells? How are the white blood cells moving? You can actually see them live, like an animal in the wild, and you can see what it's interacting with. You can see the quality of the actual blood. And then, of course, to the left of the microscope, we had that like white machine that was basically the actual CBC analyzer. And that actually numerically told us exactly how many neutrophils, how many lymphocytes, how many monocytes, and eosinophils and basophils. Because in essence, we have 5 soldiers that protect us. These 5 soldiers are swimming around this fluid tissue called blood, and their job is to protect us from bacteria, viruses, fungi, allergies, parasites. And so we can zoom in on them physically with our eyeballs, and you were witness to that, which is, lots and lots of super fun. But then you can actually get the mathematics coming through to tell us, okay, so what's really going on? Inform us about which soldiers are increasing in ranks. And whichever soldier is increasing in rank, you can interpret their job. So, for example, if the neutrophils were really high, on the CBC analyzer, then that would point towards that there was a bacterial infection. Or if it was eosinophils that were high, their main job is looking for allergies. And then so the interpretation would be, okay, there's undiagnosed allergies. And of course, now knowing and understanding quite intimately live in that moment in time, what's happening with that person's immune system, you can give some really good directions on how to start fixing things. So if it's bacterial, they can go on an antimicrobial program and reduce the bacteria that's in their guts, because oftentimes it's SIBO, like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And that has a whole slew of problems like hives and brain fog and arthralgia and histamine problems and palpitations and really bad wind. And it's just really bad when people get small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. But then again, it could be something like allergies, and they never knew that they were allergic to cucumbers or beetroot, and so we would get their blood tested again further and actually ask that question, okay, what is it specifically that's ticking off these eosinophils? And then the patient gets a list, just like a traffic light. Green is good, yellow is kind of like, be really careful, and then red is stop eating this food item. And that becomes their nutritionist. Their immune system actually becomes their nutritionist. And so they go on a desensitizing food plan. And then we can see the numbers change, you know, with periodic testing on the immune profile. And we can see those eosinophils or those neutrophils actually decrease once the bacteria have died off, once the allergies have been desensitized. You know, so I really like to have real-time feedback, really know what's going on. Not this policy of, you know, oh, call the clinic in 3 weeks, your blood test results might be back. And then when you do call in, it's just like, no, everything's within range, everything's normal, there's nothing wrong. Yeah. Well, why do I feel so messed up? Why have I got this headaches? Why do I have this gastric reflux if my blood test results are normal? Well, what I found out, this was all part of it way back when. We're talking like now in 1998, 1999. I made friends with a naturopathic doctor, a guy called Dr. Dickon Weatherby. He's got a great series of books all about blood chemistry. In fact, Dickon took me under his wing and he became a mentor for a bit. And he's totally inspirational. And he was absolutely rock solid in explaining to me the difference between, you know, the lab ranges that are 2 standard deviations on a bell-shaped curve, and then where integrated medicine, where functional medicine works from, which is 1 standard deviation. It's much more narrower. It doesn't go to the edges of the curve. On the edges of the curve is outright disease. And so when you go to see a GP or, you know, a doctor, you know, in a specialist doctor, they're usually going to be looking for outright disease. And that's why they'll come back and they'll say, well, no, your bloods are normal. That's kind of fine. There's no full disease, but they miss out on the functionality. So those people who are their results are in the 1.5 standard deviation, they start to have symptoms coming through. And that was really key in that insight, was that the approach of functional medicine, integrated medicine, was really about getting that client back into optimum range. And the optimum range is not the same as the lab ranges. The lab ranges are designed to detect disease and pathology. Whereas in functional medicine, it's like, let's keep you in optimum health. But then one approach really advocates food, lifestyle changes, you know, it's personal responsibility, supplements, stuff like that. The other one emphasizes surgery, drugs, you know, kind of like hospital management. And I think those humans that are wise basically have now clocked onto the fact that food does really influence the level of health. You know, our lifestyle choices, the company that we keep, how much we meditate, how much we do yoga, how much infrared do we do? I mean, those are all the practices that are going to keep us within that kind of narrow optimum range. And that's what I encourage all my clients to follow. Is I'm teaching them how their body works, why their body's not working, what to do, what to eat to actually fix it, and what ancillary modalities would really help, like aligning the spine, neck treatments, infrared, maybe some acupuncture, pulsed electromagnetic frequencies. But we always come back to the optimum ranges, which is, if that client is really doing better on my program, you will see it statistically from comparative blood tests. So they'll have blood tests in January, then they'll repeat it in March, and then they'll repeat it in June. And what we want to see is a trending of that person's dysfunctionality coming back into optimum range. And then I know that I've got them back into great health, and they see it. They sleep better, they shit better, their relationships are better, they have more energy. You know, they start loving their lives, they start loving their bodies. A lot of people that come to see me are so chronically ill that they feel, and I've had this, I've noticed this, this is like an insight, is that a lot of them feel that their bodies betrayed them. And they betrayed their bodies. And it might have been their fault. They could have been involved in a terrible car accident as a passenger. They just were the wrong person in the wrong time, wrong situation. Or it could be that they had too many antibiotics and they formed a tumor. Or, you know, it kind of like, it's kind of tough, but the truth is, it really comes down to the simple truth of our bodies function off good food, good water, good company. And I think we've gone so far down this pharmaceutical track and now come full circle, knowing that it really doesn't cure. It only treats symptoms. And that's really kind of like sucky, because a lot of people want to actually live their lives fully. And it's living their lives fully means taking responsibility and the discipline. And when I say responsibility and discipline, I say it to my clients that responsibility is the ability to respond. That's what responsibility is. It's not about having something really heavy on your shoulders and bearing you down. The responsibility thing is, do you have the ability to respond to the information from the blood chemistries, the stool testing, all this data, and actually work with me to create a better outcome for the future? And when I say discipline, I just say, well, discipline is just love anyway. If you love what you do, you'll be disciplined about it because you love what you do. And if you love what you do, you're going to do it really well. And that's the end point for my clients, because they become well. They become well again.
I think, you know, and I think what you are doing as well is that you are, you know, as you say, you're passionate about this subject. It's something that you love. And I think that's quite infectious that you put onto your clients. And not only, I think it's the detail, but you spending the time with people to not just identify those problems, but, you know, you're telling them how to fix it. And I think that is, that's really key. You've just led me on to the next question really nicely. It's flown well, because the future of kind of well-being and vitality is kind of a two-part of the question, but that one, what you think that is, and the problems that, you know, we think we're going to face in the future.
Okay, so the future of well-being, in a nutshell, it's literally going to be integrated. Yeah. It's the only way. Whether you look at it on a level like combining Western medicine and Eastern medicine, which is my preferred way of doing it, or if it's well-being from the perspective of looking at a very Western way, which is genetics. I'm really heavily getting into genetics. It's one of my pet projects now, and I love it. It does really explain a lot. It's a new area, as you know, genetics. A lot of people are actually looking at the genetics, like 23andMe and Ancestry and stuff like that. And I think it's really, really valid. But on a medical functional level, you can actually take genetic tests to tell you what genes you inherited in how you process your proteins or your folate, or how well you can detox. You can also take gene tests to tell you how much serotonin is being coded, and how much dopamine is being coded. I see a lot of clients that have low serotonin codes, and they have high COMT codes or high dopamine codes. And I'll say to them, when I'm reading their genetics, it's almost like doing a tarot spread or like a crystal ball, you know, but this is real. I mean, this is real, tangible, you know, evidence. And because it's genetic, I mean, if they took the test again, it would come up with the same answers. The genetics stay the same, but it's about nature and nurture. And you can nurture your genetics through a different expression. So I had a client the other day who has the low serotonin and high dopamine mix. And I told them, well, if you take SAM-E, it'll lower the dopamine. And if you take 5-HTP, it'll raise the serotonin. And they have really experienced some really beneficial psych changes. They're sleeping better because serotonin creates melatonin, you know, so there's a natural overspill coming through. So they're feeling better, more joyful during the day, like a natural kind of Prozac, which is all based on recycling serotonin. But genetically, if that person is a low serotonin producer, well, not to hook them on Prozac or Zoloft or Paxil, but to actually answer the genetics and give them the right amount of 5-HTP that will shore up and actually sort of start flooding that defective system. And then they start actually building more serotonin. Serotonin then flows into melatonin, so it cascades into a better sleep process. But then serotonin is also really, really important for bowel movements as well. Serotonin is not only about joy and feeling blissful, but serotonin is also about creating the peristaltic wave for the poo. Yeah. So you've got this interaction of serotonin during the day, then it converts into melatonin at night. They get 7.5, 8 hours sleep. And then what happens an hour after getting up, the bowel movement comes through. And this is really important because on a genetic level, it would explain why people get depressed and why they get constipated. An orthodox way is just put them on Prozac and put them on laxatives. But my way is like, no, you go deeper. You go looking for the serotonin production and evaluate it. And then you go looking at how the bowels are actually registering this. You look at the bowel microbiome. So it's a much more integrated system, you know, and it really comes down to just looking deeper You know, the answers are there. Sorry, got a little call coming in here. Oh, she's come off. That's great. But the bottom line, yeah. Oh, and again, sorry about this.
Good.
That's it.
So popular, you see. They're trying to get hold of you already.
It's just my daughter, really.
Okay.
Yeah, she's probably just trying to get in touch with her mother, if the truth be told. But yeah, it really comes down to, it's really sort of digging down. I mean, people hire me because I'm more of a detective than a doctor.
That's a great statement. Yeah, that's it. And I think people really are now being, more aware, whether it's, I think that pandemic definitely shifted people's mindsets, whether or not it was they just spent a lot of time just reflecting, spending with their families, even work related is probably why when they're trying to do employment now, they're looking at all the benefits around, the job, does it have healthcare, so forth. And it's a real mindset shift. And I think this kind of 2022 onwards, people are so much more wanting to be more aware, of their wellness, their health. And that's why I think it's trending. It is a huge trending subject.
Well, I think it comes down to a couple of things, which was the vaccines didn't do what they said, what was said on the tin. We know that there's been a lot of injuries as a result of it. There's a lot of athletes that have died from clots, and they're young athletes, and it's just, the statistics are just ridiculous. They're kind of being covered up, but we know that. I mean, thank goodness we've got sort of like other feeds of media besides the major media houses. And we know that where there's smoke, there's fire. And I myself, not only have I seen this on Instagram and Facebook and, people sharing stories, but I've also seen it in my clinic in the trenches. I see a lot of clients that basically are vaccine damaged. And I have to go in there and start hunting for the vaccine, because the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, the corona, has a particular signature to it. And I will, once I've balanced up their sort of chemistries, then I can hook them up to the radio frequency scanner. And as long as I can generate the signal of the COVID vaccine, and I've got it on the database, I'll ping it through the client, and then a ping comes back and it tells me where this vaccine is actually causing disturbances. So it could be in heart tissue, lung. There's a lot of ACE2 receptors also in the brain, a lot of ACE2 receptors in ovaries. A lot of women were suffering from menstrual issues from the spike proteins, whether the spike protein came from the COVID or Omicron or Delta, or whether it came from a simulation, which was the vaccine. The spike protein is going to dock onto an ACE2 receptor. And these ACE2 receptors are really, really important. I think looking back, because hindsight's always clear sight, looking back, I think there was an enormous amount of naivety on the vaccinologists' perspective, thinking that the spike protein would be built by the human body and then it would dock onto the ACE2 receptor, and then it would literally just pick off, and that would be it. The body would learn. But it was really, really naive, because what we've now realized, just by the sheer bulk of people that are basically complaining of fatigue syndromes and mitochondriopathies post-vaccination, and that's just to name a few, because we've had people with pulmonary valve issues, shortness of breath, they've got pleuritis, and it's come out of nowhere. I've got people who have massive herpes flare up. And it's there. You can see all the vesicles, everything's really awful. And I'll say to the client, say, well, when did you ever have herpes? They said, I've never had herpes. I said, well, okay, let's go back. When did you last have chicken pox? And they said, I was 5. And that 58-year-old client is just complete. And I said, well, that's it. I said, chicken pox is herpes. It's the same family. And I said, but why does it come out a day after I've just been vaccinated? I said, well, one virus or one vaccine disturbs the stability of another vaccine that's been stabilized and is dormant. And so it aggravates it and reactivates it. So we see a lot of people with vaccine issues. And so I have to go hunting for them, for these vaccine codes. And I'll know when the client's better, simply because the fact their mitochondria are going to be working. They've been doing lots and lots of infrared and B vitamins and CoQ10, and also I know the client's going to be better because no more echoes will come through from that corona vaccine signal. It literally just diminishes to nothing, and then that person is really good. And I'm
so
just thinking,
takeaway is, people can improve.
Yeah, they can. It's really hard work. I mean, the sooner that you can get to the situation and start sorting out the mitochondria, the ACE2 receptors, fixing the gut, because a lot of people long COVID, they get SIBO, and I had lots of clients that were like, why, when I had a virus, why would I get a chronic gut infection? And I said, well, 70% of your immune system's in your gut lining, Mrs. Jones. If you get attacked by a virus or allergies, it's still going to affect your gut lining. It doesn't matter. And why? Because your immune system needs that 70% of real estate that's actually physically in the tubing to empower the immune system. And if it's being attacked on the ACE2 receptors, and there's lots of ACE2 receptors on the gut lining, well, the gut lining goes dysfunctional. So we all know our gut lining creates powerful immunity. This is why food choices are so important. Junk food creates a junk immune system. Organic food creates an organic immune system. And our whole program has been organic. I mean, it's just like the mass industrialization of humanity. I mean, has really led us down this path of where we've moved away from the organic. We're coming back full circle because we're just realizing that it is the way that we should live. But yeah, we went through this whole industrialization pharmaceutical pathway. And we're now seeing the effects of it. I mean, you know about glyphosate and Roundup. We know it's linked to autoimmune and increase in cancers and Alzheimer's. Like this, you can't hide the statistics. The smoking gun is there. The Dr. Zach Bush. I mean, he was an oncologist doctor who was working on building chemotherapeutic drugs, and he realized that the very same compounds that he was designing in the lab were the very same compounds that organic soils were making naturally by the bacteria. And so this we've got to go back to nature, back to organic, back to Gaia. Sorry, you're sure.
Back, and it's interesting because I've the education background of fitness training and getting people up to level 3 training as a personal trainer. The personal trainers are going to always only guide someone, but it is interesting because when you look back at some of the qualifications that we're still kind of then providing, sometimes that old level of knowledge is still being taught, and I always say to the students come through it's a driving test. When you finish that driving test, you're not an amazing driver. You just got to keep learning. You got to keep testing, challenge status quo, because otherwise, it's not all in that manual. The food pyramid. It's scary because you do look back at some of the stuff what you learned and you think, wow, that's old.
Really old.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was lobbied. I mean, the food pyramid was lobbied and heavily influenced by money, by the dairy industry and the meat industry, so they really overemphasized it.
Exactly.
It's kind of sucky, but the money thing, isn't it?
Exactly that. I want to get this perfect. The next one is daily habits to keep your optimum health. Yeah. Now, I appreciate that people need to obviously the key is to understand what's going inside their body, but what would you say let's talk about your daily habits.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because it's always interesting. Okay. First thing in the morning, let's take me through a day.
Yeah, go there. I want to go there. I'm chomping at the bit, mate. This is so predictable. I do this every day.
Right.
I mean, I've had a tumor, I've had candida, I'm in an amazing place of health and fitness right now. And of course, it comes down to those daily habits. It's the daily lifestyle habits that actually keep the hormones in balance. It's really important. So I wake up, right? I usually wake up around 5:30. I get up, I've got the animals downstairs, they're meowing and they're woofing and stuff. So I pet them. So I'm already sort of like getting my oxytocin going. So I'm with the pets. Of course, I'll then end up feeding the cats. I'll switch the kettle on, and then I'm going to make myself some organic mocha and coffee, and then I'll mix that with coconut milk, organic, of course. And so I've got my little beverage. The cats have stopped meowing because they're now feeding. The dogs are going to have to wait till 7 because that's their feeding time, but I'll just play with them, pet them a little bit. And then, of course, I'm then going to check maybe emails actually the first thing I'm going to do is going to check my URA score and see how well I slept, how much depth I got. And then
I noticed that on your finger. Actually, I was gonna.
Yeah,
I talked about
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm such a geek. I've got both. I've got the Apple. I got the Oura. You know,
Okay.
I'm so into the stats. I'm tracking it all the time.
For those that people don't know, that it's his sleep tracker, isn't it? As a ring, as a tech. Well, I'm actually going to do a podcast on tech, and it's including that. So that was a little shameless plug on there.
Yeah, no, it's so good. You know, backstory on that one was back in Stockholm when we were attending one of the biohackers conferences there. It was really, really good. Yeah, it was kind of interesting because they had lots of things on, and it was really kind of like juicy tech. But we gravitated to the Oura, one of the smallest things. You know, there was all these beds and things and gadgets you could use, but we gravitated to this Oura because it's just so convenient. And I started talking to the guys there and saying, my God, this is a really genial idea. You know, how did it come about? Well, actually, I was talking to the director. Can't remember his name, but he's the director, and he said, oh yeah, it's old out of work Nokia engineers. And I was like, what? And I said, yeah, we were out of work, you know, iPhone, you know, what was it called? The black, there was the competitor. What was it? It's the funny keyboard one.
BlackBerry.
BlackBerry, yeah, the BlackBerry. Yeah. And then iPhone took over. And so we had all these Nokia engineers that are out of work. And a couple of us got together and we thought, what could we create that's really going to really work, you know? And they came up with the Oura rings. So they were, yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah.
It's so awesome. I really love it. And so now I'm wearing Gen 3. I've gone through Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3.
Okay. Yeah.
Got the oximeter on it now as a feature. So it's got real-time heart rate monitoring, so it's kind of competing with the old Apple Watch.
Yeah,
what it can't do is Oura Ring can't tell the time. But I imagine in the future they're probably going to have a digital version where you can just touch it and it will just come up with the time or something.
Well, you've just given them an idea now. If they ever...
Well, there you go. Well, yeah, 5% for me for the originating the idea, please. You know.
So, sorry, I digress. You've checked your Oura Ring. You've checked your sleep.
And then you know, I've had a couple of sips of the mocha, and then what happens is I get the bowel movement coming through, and so then I go to the bathroom and I use a squatty potty. You know what a squatty potty is? So it basically elevates your knees towards your chest.
Yeah.
And in all humans and in mammals, we have this ligament called the puborectal ligament, and it's a ligament that basically, when the hips are folded up towards the chest, it actually opens the pipe. If the knees are away from the chest, then basically that ligament's going to close the pipe partially. And if somebody stands up, then the whole poop chute is closed. Yeah. So this puborectal ligament is really, really important. And it was something that I'd learned in India when I went traveling there. And I was, you know, I was ashram hopping and meditating, doing lots and lots of yoga when I was like 18, 19 years of age. But squatting was really, really normal. And so we squat here in our house, and it really helps with the bowel movements. After that, I'll do some emails. I'll finish off my coffee. I'll do a little bit of medical reports from the previous day and just finish them off. Then I'm going to throw some breakfast together. So it's either going to be organic granola with blueberries and strawberries with some coconut milk if I'm doing kind of like a cereal carby kind of day. Or if I'm going to go for more like a protein kind of day, I'm going to have 2 eggs, Tabasco, balsamic sauce, a little bit of celery exalt, you know, for the flavor, because I like some sort of punchy meal. And then I have a little bit of romaine lettuce and some cucumber and some beets to kind of balance up the protein with the green. And then after that, it's going to be, you know, getting in the car and going to the clinic. I'm going to do 3 hours, so I'll do it till 12:15. I'll have lunch, which is usually sushi or some fish or, it's like salmon, coleslaw, more beets, more salad, more greens. And that's pretty much it. I usually have fish for lunch because I like to keep it light.
Yeah.
And then I'm back to work at 1, seeing clients and analyzing chemistries and doing bioresonance, etc. And then I get back usually around 4:15, 4:30. And then when I'm not on a podcast, for example, I will be playing with the dogs, having a cup of rooibos tea because that's very antibacterial. It keeps the microbiome nicely balanced. Without getting the whole caffeine hit from it, you know. Yeah. So caffeine in the morning is cool, but caffeine after 12, it sucks. Yeah, it completely distorts melatonin cycles. So yeah, if I have a hot beverage, it's usually rooibos. Dandelion is a favorite one of mine now as well because it's so good for liver and kidneys. And then pretty much I'll start writing my reports, my medical reports, and then it's pretty much wrapping that up, playing with the dogs more. I might go to the gym because I've got my own little personal gym set. So I might work out for 20, 25 minutes, do some resistance band work, push-ups, bench press, incline, or leg extension, hammies, lat pull downs, bent over rows, flies. And I try to compact it really, really tight. I want it in about like that whole Tabata kind of approach. So 15 minutes, done. You know, I've done all my sets, four body parts sets, right? And then after that, it's going to be dinner. And with the kids, and then we have something really healthy. You know, it's usually going to be meat, or it's going to be chicken, organic, of course. 3 vegetables, a salad on the side, and usually a really healthy carb that suits an O blood. You know, so for us, it's like yam, potatoes, turnips, parsnips. And then pretty much it's chuck down my supplements. All the while, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I've been chucking down my supplements. Throughout the day, I take my pregnenolone as well, which is my adrenal hormone. And then I take a tiny amount of DHEA. It's usually 1 milligram. And that just keeps me going through the day. And then it's dinner, and then it's pretty much a movie, something like a series, maybe something like Grand Designs if I want to be really sort of chill and relaxed, but if I want something a bit more stimulating, I'll look at a, historical, drama or something like that, Downton Abbey. I try not to look at too much violent stuff at night, simply because the fact it's too overstimulating. It's too much dopamine coming through. It's going to screw up my sleep pattern, so I really want to wind down the day with something really relaxing. And, and I like, knowing about houses and construction, and, I like Kevin MacLeod. I think he's a really good presenter. It's that's pretty much my day.
What's bedtime?
Bedtime's usually yawning at around sort of like 9:30, 9:45. And then I'm like brushing my teeth. I take a couple of spritzes of 5-HTP to nudge my serotonin, melatonin. I take 1 drop of melatonin, which is the equivalent of around, I think, 0.35 micrograms. It's tiny, but it is, the less is more principle. You just need that little ticket at the right time. And then I sleep like a log. And that's pretty much it. And then the whole groundhog starts again. I've just got all these habits in place. And it maintains, amazing excellence of health. And I can see it in my own blood chems. I mean, I take my blood chems regularly. I check my stools. I check my hormones regularly. I want nothing more than a fantastically healthy life full of energy, because we only get 100 years. So the more energy you have, the better your digestion, the better your lifestyle choices, then the more fulfilled you feel.
And it is fascinating because you are living proof of it, because, when I was at your clinic, I mean, it was in a short period of time, but it was a case of you have to be fully coherent, fully, firing on all cylinders, because you had next client, and you were, and you were performing top peak, so it was interesting to ask about your habit.
Reliance is really knowing how my adrenals work and knowing how much pregnenolone I have to take to match the energy levels of a 35-year-old. Currently I'm 54, but I definitely have the energy of a 35-year-old. And if I didn't do that adrenal program, I would have far less energy. But that's the whole point. I mean, if Oprah Winfrey was interviewing me and said, have you found the fountain of youth? And I'll go, yeah, I kind of have. It's not a complete story, but I think if you fix your genetics and you fix your adrenals and get your hormones really, really balanced, then amazing things can happen. Well, you just have to look at Kelly. I mean, he's just got a stellar track record. I mean, I know he's super talented, without a doubt, but statistically, he should have burnt out 33, 34, but he just happened to meet the right person at the right time to do the right things. And just to tell him, Kelly, buddy, you're burnt out. You burnt out from, 13 years of the professional circuit. You got 6, major world championships. That's double what anybody else has, and he really took on board the lesson of, prevent burnout, look after your adrenals. And so I know he takes all the herbs that I have recommended to him and the supplements, and he still does it to this day. The lessons that I've impressed upon him, he still carries on. And he is the epitome of the fountain of youth. His career still goes on. And, I just can't wait to take on more, athletes and say, look, I know for sure as a footballer, if you follow my program, you get another 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years to your career. or if it's an actor or a pop star. It all comes down to energy, and energy is dependent on the adrenal hormones and genetics. If you get that right, amazing things happen.
Exciting is that for someone to hear, you know, especially as an athlete. What's the future for the Maas Clinic?
Future for the Maas Clinic is we're actually opening up our second branch, which is in London in 58 South Moulton Street. Okay. Currently, we're just renting temporary premises there, but I think the long-term future is that we're going to get our own premises and be able to set up the sister clinic and actually be able to run it full-time. Phoenix, my firstborn daughter, she's 23, and she's now in her third year of osteopathy. She's following the same track as her dad. She's going to qualify as an osteopath. She's then going to get trained up in functional medicine, possibly even go into integrated medicine and get her doctorate. So she's coming up in the ranks, so she's going to join me as part of the family team. And we will co-manage the two clinics together. I think I'm going to get another functional medicine practitioner to join us as well, because I don't know what's happened, but in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, there's been an enormous interest. I mean, we're getting new clients through the wazoo right now. I mean, it's kind of difficult because we can't take too many on board. We're starting to build a waiting list. Yeah. Because if we take on too many on board, the loop system of the existing patients as they come back for their reappraisals gets thrown off. So it's a little bit of a delicate process.
And coming back to being superhuman, this is just, you know, at the moment, it's you parting this knowledge. It's kind of great to hear that daughter's following footsteps, because you're kind of, you know, you're kind of like Yoda, okay? She's the Obi-Wan, there's Luke Skywalker's. You need to pass on your Jedi skills.
But yeah, you can be one. I mean, that's the whole thing. That's what George Lucas was playing at. It says, you know, it's somebody who basically does use the force of the force. I mean, come on, the force. And let's talk about the other parallel, which was what was it? Chloroquines. So chloroquines. Oh yeah, he's got the highest density of chloroquines. You know, and you know, but they're just mitochondria. They're just analogies for the mitochondria. Somebody has really good mitochondrial function, has abundant energy, and I'm always infrareding. I'm always chucking a CoQ10 in. I mean, I just need energy, and it's how you channel that energy. You know, and for me, I think that the whole Star Wars parallel was true, because if you really become a true Jedi, or, you know, it's all about balancing the forces, Luke, you know. It really is about the yin and yang. I mean, George Lucas was massively influenced by Joseph Campbell, who was the famous author behind The Hero with 1,000 Faces and The Power of Myth. And Joseph was an anthropology teacher at Sarah Lawrence College in the 70s and 80s. But George was really impressed with him, and they started really getting on well. And so Joseph, you know, told George, look, there's some really fundamental myths, structure that come down through cultures about the war between good and evil. You know, the balance between the light and the dark. I mean, it goes on forever. It goes on eternally. But the Jedi knows how to balance it. And yeah, so I do think I'm a bit of a Jedi as a parallel, because I know how to balance the forces. And it's the forces of yin and yang, the forces of heat and cold, you know, the warm and the damp. I mean, it really is. And I'll talk to my clients a lot about this, which is, you know, that if they've got chronic diseases, they're in a really deep yin field, and they've got to yang up. They've got to use the infrared. They've got to use the mitochondrial resuscitate. They've got to create more energy through the hormonal systems. You know, it's just like putting a Bunsen burner under a test tube. You've got to warm it up.
And I think it is so important, because personal training and my clients as well, it's the case of, you know, I've always reiterated to them, if you're feeling tired today, listen, let's not train. Don't train. It's your body telling you, you know. But how many times people are overtraining, reversibility, you know, they start crashing, and it's homing in just to listen to your body, understand, you know, let's start with the real basics, you know, what you're fueling, how are you sleeping, you know, and more so, it was interesting you touched on it, because I started reading a book. I was in holiday in St. Ivan. I picked up this book on a shelf, and it was on gut health, and it was I'll reference to it later, but it had the picture of the pooping on a, you know, with a stool raising up the knees, and it was about the communication of you know, between the two, and actually opening up that chain. And the way she explained it was brilliant, had a diagram in there as well. which, by the way, I work off diagrams on a.
It's very visual, very visual.
I am visual. I love it. That's why I'm always on YouTube. But it was just fascinating to come with that. So now I've got a little blue store. Okay, I've got a little blue store. It's brilliant.
It works.
Big game changer.
Yeah, I think I've got a funny story, which was, with Kelly and the exercise, because he's the best athlete that I've treated of all time. I mean, he is the greatest of all time. But I remember having a conversation with him and just literally breaking down, how he was training. And of course, part of that adrenal burnout that he went through was he wasn't training properly. You nailed it. It was literally overtraining. And I asked him, I said, look, so how long do you, when you're preparing for a competition, how long are you training for? And he said, 4 hours, sometimes 8 hours. And I said, yeah, but that's going to create the different type of muscle, though. That's a slow endurance muscle that you're training there. I said, competitions are not like that. It's about who can paddle the fastest, who can take off the fastest. You've got to really just recode your muscle function. You've got to encourage fast twitch muscle responses. And then he said, well, how do I do that? And I explained to him how he would do it. And of course, one of the central pieces was that, and this was the nugget that kind of changed it, which was a heat, like a competition heat is usually between sort of like 30 and 40 minutes. And that would be the unit of how much a pro surfer would actually surf for. And he said, but that's crazy. I said, no, it's not. It's just that you're trying to encourage fast twitch muscle responses. It's not about endurance sessions. That's not what the competition is about. It's about who can become number one, who's the fastest, who can rip the hardest, who can hold the most barrels. And it really comes down to energy, but also that performance of the muscle itself, because you've got milliseconds, or not even a microsecond to get into the wave. Yeah. And be able to stand up. I mean, and everything's happening so fast, and you've got this big barrel coming over. Those microseconds are absolutely important. And it all comes down to nerves and reflexes and muscle responses. And so he changed up his training technique to actually incorporate more like a 45-minute session, then actually be able to put the electrolytes back in, have the ginseng tea, have the banana for the potassium, wait a little bit, and then go for another 45-minute session.
It comes back to that whole circle, that whole picture. So it is fascinating, and I think what you're doing is iconic because it's that other side that people want to tap into now. They're starting to move better. Well, I need to figure out what's going inside, so I can move.
Yeah, they're fitter, but are they necessarily healthier?
Yeah,
that's the question. Like you can have really fit, unhealthy people.
Exactly.
Yeah, there was an osteopath who was at university. This is when I was at university as a student, and may he rest in peace. But he's died. The chap I'm thinking of, and he, as an osteopath, refused to acknowledge. Of course, I mean this is back in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and he refused to basically believe that food could heal. He said exercise was everything. I want to say his name, but I shouldn't. No, but but Mr. A, and he really stood out. And of course, I'm at university. I must be like 19, 20 years old. I've already gone through the whole headaches, eczema thing, right? So I know that food is really, really powerful. And I just thought, wow, that is just unbelievable. There's so many other osteopaths and naturopaths that believe that food is a superpower. And this one guy just says, nah, do everything with exercise. Do you know, after I qualified, about 5 years later, I actually heard on the grapevine that he died from a massive heart attack in the gym.
Wow.
And he was so young. It was just ridiculous. I mean, I laugh at it now, but the irony is he refused to believe in the superpowers of food. And he just said exercise. So he was super fit and really unhealthy.
And I, back in my original podcast, we talked about with Gareth, we talked about being a sponge. You have to just, challenge. You have to learn. You have to understand. Read tons of books. And I think that is so important.
I think what's really important for the Western mindset, and I've learned this because from the studying Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, I think and meditation yoga. I think the most important thing is there really is a goal. You have to just remind yourself that the goal is balance in everything. It doesn't matter if it's to do with calcium and magnesium, or acid and alkaline, or overtraining bicep and not training tricep enough. to do back muscles when you're doing chest muscles. So you're always balancing the antagonist and the agonist. So I think, come back to the point of balance. It feels right when things are balanced. Peace of mind comes through, so that whole yin yang philosophy is going to start coming a bit more into the Western mindset, how to stay balanced for the rest of one's life.
Little takeaways for people, and then I'm going to ask you about kind of any podcasts or you're listening, is you talked about your habits, but are there kind of immediate takeaways that people listening to this could start doing, for better optimum health?
What you mean, like on a supplement level? What could anybody take?
Just in general, I think both, actually, both elements. I think in lifestyle habits, and supplements that's a great one.
Yeah. So I mean, we could do herb, food, supplement, lifestyle practice. So good herb takeaway right now would be oregano. I mean, I think it's really good because it basically does fight viruses and bacteria. So that's really, really helpful. A lot of people eat way too much sugar, and oregano will kill off the bacteria that's thriving off the sugar. It'll also kill off candida. And lots of people, are walking around it with silent, candidiasis. I mean, I did for many years. Yeah. So a good herb, good vitamin would be something like CoQ10. Okay. It's really, really good because it is the primary molecule that activates the cells, and it's really important for the heart. A lot of people unknowingly have CoQ10 deficiencies because they just don't eat enough fish and salmon. And, if they had a kind of like Okinawa kind of Japanese lifestyle, they'd be having lots of CoQ10, but majority of people just don't have that kind of lifestyle. Yeah. So supplement with it, CoQ10 is really important. A takeaway food that I find is really, really impressive is kiwi. I think kiwi is an unsung hero. Yeah, really powerful stuff.
Kiwi in ages.
Yeah, it's so good. It is actually really, really good for anybody who wants to improve their protein metabolism and minimizing the risk of heart disease. The reason why is because the body sometimes can produce high levels of homocysteine. And homocysteine is a protein, it's an amino acid that's broken down from processing protein like methionine. So any protein's got methionine in it. And the way the body breaks it down is it will break it down into homocysteine. But homocysteine is like lava. It needs to be handled with asbestos gloves. And the way the body does that is it does it with beets, kiwi being one of my favorites. It also does it with quinoa and spinach. So those are really superfoods. And it also manages it with B6. So if you want a B vitamin that really helps people, it's vitamin B6. It's really good for preventing, homocysteine going high. And if homocysteine goes high, it can lead to depression, cancers, IBD, and cardiac risk massively increases. But, so many doctors just don't test for homocysteine. And yet it's routine. It's absolutely routine. And if someone's homocysteine is high, and if they have a history of heart disease, then I'm going to call for the genetics. And then I'm going to say, okay, what's coming down the family line of heart disease that would explain that each generation is getting high homocysteine, and how much B6 that person, and how much kiwi do they have to eat in order to prevent and mitigate that cardiac risk. So that's kiwi for you. What else? Lifestyle habit. I think walking is really, really good. Walking in nature, forest bathing, just being with nature, whether it's walking along a lake or next to the sea. I think just give time to do a kind of walking meditation and connect. So it's really nice with dogs. It's also really great with company, but it's especially beautiful when you can just do it by yourself. You can just do it all alone. And I say that when someone is alone, they are all one. They have the opportunity to be all one. They're in their own space. They're in their own soul space. And they are literally just walking, breathing, looking, being, just to practice that. And
I really agree with that because, having dogs, hence why that door keeps open, because my dog keeps pushing it open. But going out with dogs it does get you walking. But interestingly, taking up a little bit very beginner photography, but that's been an eye-opener for me for walking out, because what you would normally just walk past, it's a tree, it's a bit of nature. Now you're homing in on it, you're starting to focus on it a little more, you appreciate it more, and that for me has been a fantastic thing.
Yeah, K9 knock there.
Yeah, no, she just closed it. I don't know how she did that.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, and I think what it really comes down to is what you're actually getting to, Simon, is the eye of the poet. The eye of the poet, someone who can really be in the moment and just appreciate a bird song, or the way ivy is growing on that rocky wall, or the way the wind blows in their face and the shape of the guy. I mean, this is the eye of the poet. You know, we live in a society that is so fractured. Everything is so split up into little units. I mean, I'm guilty of it myself, because majority of my work is about analyzing blood chemistries and all this data, and I've got to pull it all together. But at the end of it, I know I've got to balance up yin and yang. You know, all that data is all yin. I've got to go out into the yang now and connect with nature and be with my dog, get the energy going, you know. So it really comes down to, it's a balance thing once again. Balance.
I think that is important, because I think tech, whilst we're in this tech age and it's moving forward and tech can do everything for you, I think a good takeaway for people is just to kind of sometimes just get away from it, because people don't, do they?
And experience life. I mean, real life, you know. It doesn't necessarily have to be with people. It can be with, you know, pets and places and landscapes, but just to connect with nature. It like Deepak Chopra says, it connects you to the field of potentiality, you know. And if you start encouraging, you know, more peaceful thoughts, more peaceful situations will come to you. It's like the law of attraction, Joe Dispenza and all of that. I mean, it's just fantastic stuff.
Love it.
But the key,
the book, The Secret, I love that book. Brilliant.
It's really, really good. Yeah,
I love that book.
Yeah, you know, but I had a guy actually who did The Secret, right? It's a funny story. And I said, so what was your secret? What was your law of attraction? And so he's going back in time, and he said, well, I wanted lots of scantily clad women around me. I mean, that's what I really wanted. I just want to be with more women and scantily clad. And I said, well, how did it manifest? And he said, well, I got this fantastic opportunity while I was, you know, surfing in Bali. And I was doing some yoga on the beach, and one of the spa holders, you know, the owners said, you know, are you looking for some work, you know? And so they gave him a job. And then suddenly he was in this classroom with scantily clad women. And he was just like, oh my God, this is the secret.
I also dangerously once, the Yes Man did, I did it for a couple of weeks where I couldn't say no to anything. And I'm not going to dive into that, but I got into some very weird situations. But but what it did do, out of interest, is it opened me up to just lots of things where necessarily I might have been, no, go away, you know, met new people, explored things. So, hey.
It's great meeting new people, because in those moments of new people, in that moment, you can share and exchange ideas. And sometimes the exchanging of ideas can be so powerful, it actually changes one's life. But you never know who's out there.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm actually, you know, it's a bit of a hobby doing this podcast, because if it wasn't for doing the stuff I'm learning, it's an active way of learning. Exploring and meeting like yourself and sharing what you're doing, because if it wasn't the case, I wouldn't have known. I think it's a good point. My last little point for you, which is recommended podcasts, books that you suggest to people, or things to go out and read and listen to.
One thing that I constantly recommend to my clients, which of course is very educative, but it's really, really interesting because it blows people's minds, is YouTube, Dr. Zach Bush, Chemical Farming and the Loss of Human Health.
Okay.
That's a really, really good one. And it really talks about the whole explosion of autoimmune and neurological problems and heart problems and autism since the 1960s and 70s, when glyphosate was introduced, and it's just gone out of control, causes leaky gut, leaky brain. So I really recommend that one.
Right.
I listen to a lot of podcasts from Dr. Mark Hyman, because he's an absolute hero of mine. He's just an absolute hero, really. I mean, he's so personable. He's like your friendly neighborhood doctor who really has got good scruples. He's got really good values. He knows the power of food. He knows the human body can heal itself, you know, if it's just given the right information and the right nutrients. So I listen to a lot of his podcasts. Other podcasts, not many. Actually, it's just pretty much Dr. Mark Hyman. You know,
and you, little plug, but you're transitioning from your Instagram into a podcast now, right? Because
we're making that transition, but I can't say that I really enjoy listening to myself. I mean, Simon.
But you'll be interviewing lots of other people, I can imagine. You'll have a Hyman on it.
I should practice in the mirror more often or something like that. But anyway, what else?
What about any books?
Books currently that I'm reading a really good one on the immune system. I mean, I can go and grab it, but it's a really big one. Can't remember the author's name. I just finished Michael Pollan's book as well, and then I've now just seen the Netflix series, so I think it's much better than Netflix series, which was How to Change Your Mind, which was a journalist's exploration in the vilification of hallucinogens and psilocybins, you know, during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and the Nixon and the Reagan years, and how it's coming full circle, and how the pharmaceutical companies don't really like it simply because of the fact that 3 microdoses of psilocybin can pretty much eradicate depression and get rid of alcoholism and help people make these amazing breakthroughs. And, you know, but it's really good. So reading the book, it would take maybe a month and a half. Watching the series, it'd take an hour, maybe 2 hours. That's it. You know, so I do recommend that. Other things, what else is there that I'm into? Not much at the moment. Apart from that, that's it. It's actually really sort of all about the clinic and the practice.
I think they're great suggestions. I don't want to keep you any longer. I'm going to let you go and wind down for your evening. I'm going to
go with the dogs. Collies. Somebody should have warned me about collies. Collies, basically, you get a collie, you get a free exercise program. That's what goes on. You know, and they're ball crazy, absolutely nuts about a ball. But yeah, they keep me busy, and I love them. I love dogs. I've always loved dogs. They're just the best, and they really are. And for me, you know, I mean, I've gone through Weimaraners, I've gone through Jack Russells. Now I'm going through the collie phase, but it's just, I love dogs. They're just great creatures. They really are. I love them. Yeah. And then another tip is my dogs get the best food. Honestly, they get the best food without a doubt.
Ours are the same, actually. Chicken, broccoli, there's all things going on. Sometimes some great meals.
It's nothing but the best meals for them. They have really wet noses and shiny coats, and you know, I want the best from them. They don't get any grain, no grains at all, you know. So it really is absolutely it's key, because if I look after them, they love me more, and you know, have more fun with them. There's more oxytocin, more fulfillment. And you know what's really sad is that they're only here for like 14, 15 years. So you have to enjoy each moment, you know, because their lifespans are actually relatively short.
So listen, if people want to get in touch with you, you're on Instagram, what channels you are, what's the best method to get in touch with?
If they want to really get in touch, it's like, you know, get in touch with the clinic, you know, via the website. You know, we've got all the contact us. They can look at www.themaasclinic.com. And of course, we are on Instagram. We're also on Facebook as well. And so people can message us and reach out if they want to heal their adrenals and guts and genetics, and just if they want total well-being. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll plug in some links and the reference to your books and so on.
Thanks, Simon.
Maas, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Great. Thanks for being such a great host.
Thank you.